My daughter-in-law gave me a rundown outbuilding and told me to be grateful. I didn't say a word. I just quietly rebuilt it, piece by piece, until the day she walked in, looked around, and went dead silent. 3 days later, she told me I had 72 hours to get out. I nodded and started packing, but not to move into the basement. Brooke stood in the doorway of the old detached carriage house and gave me a cold smile. "This is perfect for you, Joanne," she said, pointing at the water-stained walls and cracked concrete floor. "You'll have your peace and quiet out here, and we'll have plenty of space to ourselves over in the main house." Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through the grimy windows. It smelled like rotting wood and decay. Caleb, my only son, stood silently behind her, avoiding my gaze. He stared at his shoes like the cure for his guilty conscience was hidden in the laces. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just took the rusty key from Brooke's hand. They had just moved into the sprawling house that I had put the down payment on, leaving me with this absolute teardown. It was a clear line they had drawn without even bothering to ask me. But lines work both ways. As soon as they left, I set my few cardboard boxes on the dusty floor. Arguing was pointless, I knew that much. Brooke wanted control. Caleb wanted peace. And I was done being an unwanted guest in my own life. I took off my jacket and filled a bucket with water. The chill seeped through the cracks, but I barely felt it. A plan was already coming together in my head. I didn't need their permission to fix this place up. The carriage house was small, but the bones were solid. I started with the window right away. Every wipe across that filthy glass felt like a step away from depending on them. By evening, the worst of the grime was gone. I rolled my mattress out on the cleanest patch of floor. My back ached, but my mind was racing. My whole life, I'd been taking care of other people. Now, it was finally my turn. I pulled a little notebook from my purse and started crunching numbers. My pension, my savings, my options. Nobody really knew how much of a nest egg I was sitting on. When I finally closed my eyes, I could hear Brooke's loud laugh drifting over from the main house. It didn't bother me in the slightest. The very first step had been taken. I was up early the next morning, sipping coffee from a thermos. I kept an eye on the main house. The blinds stayed drawn. Brooke and Caleb were sleeping in. I grabbed my purse and caught the bus heading toward the big home improvement store on the edge of town. I paid in cash. I bought top-tier insulation, bright interior paint, high-quality snap-together laminate flooring, and some tools. I scheduled the delivery for that afternoon, right when I knew Brooke would be at her hair appointment. I didn't want to answer any questions or deal with prying eyes on my construction zone. When the delivery truck pulled up, I quietly carried the boxes inside. My hands got rough and calloused, but with every stroke of the paintbrush, a little more of my old resignation vanished. I spent the next few weeks completely absorbed in my new domain. Caleb would occasionally wander over, hovering awkwardly in the doorway, asking if I needed a hand. His hands, however, stayed firmly planted in the pockets of his expensive jacket. "No thanks. I'm doing just fine on my own," I'd answer calmly, rolling paint onto the next wall. He'd look visibly relieved and quickly make himself scarce. Brooke ignored me completely. She was too busy ordering expensive furniture for the main house bills I knew were stretching them way beyond their means. But I kept my mouth shut. That wasn't my problem anymore. I stayed focused on my project. I hired a local plumber to replace the old pipes and paid him directly. Fortunately, the carriage house was on its own. Electrical and water meters, a little detail Brooke had completely overlooked when she handed it over to me. I had a modern, freestanding pellet stove installed, which instantly filled the space with a deep, cozy warmth. My little room was transforming into a genuine home. It was simple, but everything was top quality and exactly to my taste. One evening, I was sitting in my new plush armchair, listening to the fire crackling softly in the stove. I pulled up my banking app on my tablet. I stared at the recurring transfer, the $500 a month I sent to Caleb's account just to help out. Without a second thought, I hit delete. I needed my money for myself now. Suddenly, a soft knock on the door broke the peace and quiet. I set my tablet aside and opened the door. Brooke was standing there shivering without a coat, arms crossed. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words died in her throat. Her eyes drifted past me into the room. The soft glow of my new floor lamp highlighted the rich wood tones of the laminate flooring. The pellet stove was pumping out a comforting heat you could feel all the way out on the porch. The whole place smelled fresh and clean. "I just wanted to see if you were still alive in here," she finally muttered, but her tone had shifted. That condescending chill had been replaced by raw surprise. She pushed past me, stepping inside without an invitation. She ran her hand over the smooth top of my new dresser and stared at the custom blinds. "Well, this looks really nice," she murmured. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like an accusation. "It's very comfortable," I replied evenly, staying planted by the open door. I didn't offer her a seat. Brooke slowly paced the room. I could practically see the gears turning in her head. She was comparing this peaceful, toasty space to the massive, cluttered main house where she was constantly battling spotty Wi-Fi and an ancient HVAC system. You know, she started that calculating smile creeping back onto her face. Honestly, it's a shame to just use this space as a bedroom. The natural light in here is fantastic. This would make an incredible home office. Or a yoga studio for me. She looked at me like she expected me to just nod and hand over the keys on the spot. I pushed the door closed a few inches. "It's my home, Brooke, and it's set up exactly how I need it." Her smile vanished in a flash. "We pay the mortgage on this property, Joanne. Don't forget that." She spun around and marched out. I quietly closed the door behind her and turned the deadbolt twice. She thought she held all the cards because her name was on the loan, but she had no clue who actually owned what in here. The real showdown started the next morning. It took exactly 2 days for her to come back. This time, she brought Caleb. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at the table organizing some paperwork. Caleb looked exhausted, but Brooke looked like she was on a mission. They didn't wait to be invited in. "Joanne, we need to talk," Brooke announced, planting herself dead center in the room. Caleb hung back by the door, staring intently at the floorboards. "We've been reevaluating the situation. The main house is just too loud and chaotic for my work. I need this space for my studio." She spoke a mile a minute, leaving no room for me to interrupt. "You're just one person. You don't need all this luxury out here. We cleared out a room for you down in the basement. It's small, but it's more than enough for what you need. You can move your stuff down there." I slowly set my pen down. I looked over at Caleb. "Is that how you feel about this too?" I asked him, my voice steady. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It just makes sense, Mom. Brooke needs the space for her clients. And you'll be right downstairs with us?" The cowardice in his voice was a bitter pill to swallow, but I didn't let my disappointment show. I had stopped expecting emotional support from him a long time ago. Brooke crossed her arms. "So we're all on the same page. At the end of the day, it's our property. We let you move in here because we figured you'd make yourself useful." This is the moment where a lot of mothers would have broken down or started yelling. They would have demanded some gratitude or brought up the money they'd invested. I didn't do any of that. Emotion was the wrong currency to use here. I just gave a slight nod. Brooke immediately took my silence for weakness. A smug, triumphant smirk spread across her face. She thought she had won without even having to fight. Great. You should probably start packing your things now. I've already got contractors lined up for next week to install the mirrored wall for my studio. She spun around and practically shooed me away with her hand like I was a pesky fly. Caleb mumbled a quiet, "Bye, Mom," and hurried out after her. I stayed right where I was perfectly calm. Brooke paused in the doorway and looked back. "You have 72 hours to pack your stuff and leave this place broom swept." She said, her voice sharp and final. "I need the keys by 8 a.m. on Friday. And don't drag this out all day. The basement is waiting." Then she slammed the door. 72 hours. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was Tuesday, 2 p.m. I didn't panic. I just felt a deep, icy clarity. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved weeks ago. "Hi, Mr. Miller. This is Joanne. Is that apartment downtown still ready for move-in on Thursday? Fantastic. I'll take it. Next." I called a moving company. Nothing fancy, just two burly guys with a box truck who were willing to do an evening job. I gave them exact instructions on what needed to be dismantled. Then I logged into my online banking. It was time to cut the invisible strings. I canceled the backup credit card Caleb kept in his wallet for emergencies. I canceled the newspaper subscription, the monthly grocery delivery service for the main house, and the auto insurance policy that was still in my name but fully covered Brooke's SUV. I did it all in complete silence. Not a single word of warning. They wanted cold, hard reality. They were going to get it. On Wednesday, I started packing. And I didn't just pack my clothes. I packed the custom blinds. I took down the expensive light fixtures I had paid for out of pocket. Piece by piece, the room lost its soul. When Brooke briefly walked across the yard that afternoon, I drew the curtains. Let her stay in the dark. She probably thought I was in here crying, boxing up my sweaters to drag down to her dingy basement. In reality, I was orchestrating my permanent exit from their lives. Thursday evening, the moving truck pulled up. Under the cover of darkness, the movers hauled out the heavy pellet stove. When the room was finally stripped bare, I grabbed a broom and swept the floor. Just like Brooke asked, broom swept. My 72 hours were almost up. The room echoed again, just like it did the very first day I walked in. The warmth was entirely gone, leaving nothing but bare white walls and the basic laminate floor. I stood in the middle of the carriage house and admired my handiwork. I hadn't destroyed a single thing. I had simply taken back what belonged to me. Everything I had a receipt for was now safely packed in the back of a moving truck. The last step was the most important. I grabbed my toolbox and walked over to the front door. I unscrewed the deadbolt, pulled out the high-end security cylinder I had installed months ago, and dropped it into my purse. From an old cardboard box, I fished out the rusty, sticky lock that had been in the door when I arrived. It only took a few minutes to reinstall it. I tested the old key. It caught a little, but it worked. I had restored the building to the exact condition Brooke had so generously gifted it to me in. Empty, drafty, and bleak. My suitcase was waiting by the door. Outside, I could hear the rumble of the taxi I'd scheduled for the crack of dawn. It was Friday, 6 a.m. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a cool gray light over the driveway. The main house was dead silent. I walked over to Caleb and Brooke's front porch and set a plain white envelope on their welcome mat. Inside were the rusty key to the carriage house and the key to the basement dungeon they had picked out for me. No letter, no explanations, no guilt trips. They had laid down the law and I was responding in kind. I climbed into the back of the cab. The driver helped me lift my suitcase into the trunk. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked cheerfully. I gave him the address of my bright new apartment across town. As the car quietly rolled out of the driveway, I didn't look back once. With every mile, the weight of the last few months just melted off my shoulders. I felt lighter than I had in years. The 72 hours were officially up. The game was over. Friday morning, 8 o'clock. Brooke stepped out onto her porch, stifling a yawn and clutching a mug of coffee. She was already in her yoga gear. With a smug smile, she spotted the white envelope on the mat. She picked it up, felt the keys inside, and gave a satisfied little nod. She fully believed I had thrown in the towel and was currently sitting quietly in the basement. With an extra bounce in her step, she marched across the yard to the carriage house. She jammed the rusty key into the lock. It squealed in protest as she turned it. Brooke pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her smile vanished instantly. She blinked like her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. The room was freezing. The beautiful pellet stove was gone. Just a blank cover plate on the wall showed where the exhaust pipe used to be. The elegant curtains were missing, letting the harsh morning glare bounce off the bare floor. No cozy lamps, no furniture. Just echoing emptiness. "Joanne!" she shrieked. Her voice bounced off the walls entirely unanswered. Right at that moment, the front door of the main house flew open. Caleb came sprinting out, phone pressed to his ear, looking pale as a ghost. "Brooke!" he yelled in a panic. "The bank just called, my backup card got declined. And when I tried to log in and check our car insurance on the SUV, the portal says the policy was canceled." Brooke dropped the rusty key. It clattered loudly against the concrete step. She stared at Caleb, then slowly turned her head back to look at the gutted room. The reality was finally starting to sink in. I hadn't moved to the basement. I hadn't thrown a tantrum, and I certainly hadn't begged to stay. I had simply surgically removed my financial and material presence from their lives, without my monthly cash transfers, without me footing the bills. And without that emergency credit card, their cushy lifestyle in the big house was about to fold like a cheap card table. "Where is she?" Caleb asked in disbelief, frantically scanning the yard. Brooke didn't say a word. She just stared at the blank white walls of the space she had desperately wanted for her studio. She had gotten exactly what she demanded. The room broom swept right on the dot at 72 hours. It was just completely useless to her now. The natural light in my new apartment was absolutely incredible. I was sitting on my second-floor balcony sipping a strong espresso. The city below me was waking up. I could hear the distant rumble of the commuter train and the hum of people heading to work. It was a rhythm I instantly loved. My phone was sitting on the little patio table. It had already rung 5 times in the last hour. Caleb, over and over. I had it on silent, just watching the screen light up and fade to black. On the 6th call, I finally picked up. "Mom, thank God." "Where are you?" he practically shouted. He sounded wildly stressed. "Hi, Caleb," I said smoothly. "I'm at my new apartment." New apartment. But why did you cancel the auto insurance? And the credit card? Brooke is losing her mind. How are we supposed to make the mortgage payment this month without your contribution? His accusations just bounced right off me. They didn't have any power over my emotions anymore. "You're a grown man, Caleb," I replied without a drop of malice in my voice. "You guys have a massive house. You have your careers, and you have each other." That credit card was in my name, and so was the insurance. Since I don't live with you anymore, I have no reason to be paying for those things. "But you can't just leave us high and dry like this," he protested loudly. "I didn't leave you high and dry. You gave me 72 hours to clear out of my space, so I did. Very thoroughly." I took another sip of my espresso. It was delicious. "I wish you both a good life, Caleb. If you ever just want to talk to your mother, Give me a call. But as of today, I'm officially retiring from the bank of Mom. I didn't even wait for him to respond. I hit end and set the phone back on the table. Taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air, I didn't feel spiteful or vindictive. I just felt incredibly free. My boundaries were finally set in stone. My life was 100% mine again. The next few weeks were blissfully peaceful. I set up my new apartment using the furniture I'd brought from the carriage house. I couldn't install the pellet stove in the new place, so I sold it online and used the cash to book a week-long vacation to Italy, something I'd denied myself for years, so I wouldn't burden Caleb and Brooke financially. Every now and then, I thought about the old house, not with any regret, just with a healthy, objective distance. Based on a few brief, hesitant texts from Caleb, I knew reality had hit them like a freight train. Brooke had to sell her beloved luxury SUV because they couldn't swing the car payments and the new massively inflated insurance premiums without my monthly padding. That dream yoga studio out back never materialized. Without the insulation, the high-end heating, and all my investments, the carriage house became far too damp and freezing in the autumn weather to actually use. It reverted right back to being a glorified junk room. Exactly how they had handed it to me. Caleb awkwardly asked for money 2 more times. Both times I declined politely but firmly. I didn't over-explain, and I certainly didn't justify myself. A simple, "No, I can't do that," was more than enough. I could feel how that clarity shifted our entire dynamic. I used to feel obligated to bend over backward for his every whim. Now I saw him for what he was, an adult who needed to learn how to take full responsibility for his own choices and lifestyle. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in a little coffee shop in my new neighborhood reading a book. Nobody needed anything from me, nobody was bossing me around, and nobody was trying to lay claim to my space. I had learned the hard way that you don't earn respect by constantly sacrificing yourself. You earn it by valuing yourself and fiercely protecting your own boundaries. If you hand the keys to your life over to someone else, you can't be surprised when they lock you out. Luckily, I got my key back just in time. 6 months had passed since I left that rusty key on their welcome mat. Winter had officially settled in, but my little apartment was toasty and warm. I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes drift down onto the city rooftops. My bank account was actually growing every month now that my money was finally staying in my own pocket. Caleb had come to visit a few days earlier. It was the very first time he'd stepped foot in my new place. He looked a little older, the worry lines on his forehead carved a bit deeper. He came alone. We drank tea and stuck to small talk. He casually mentioned that they were using the carriage house to store firewood now. It was simply too expensive to gut and rebuild all over again. I just listened quietly, no gloating, but no pity either. When he left, he gave me a quick hug by the door. "You've made a really nice home for yourself here, Mom," he said softly. "Yes, I have," I replied and closed the door. There was no tearful reconciliation, no dramatic apologies. That kind of stuff mostly just happens in the movies. In the real world, people just have to live with the consequences of their actions. Brooke learned the hard way that my silence wasn't a weakness, and Caleb learned that my generosity definitely had an expiration date. I put our teacups in the sink and smiled at my reflection in the window glass. I wasn't begging for scraps anymore. I was a woman who controlled her own space, paid her own bills, and genuinely enjoyed her own peace and quiet. I didn't need to drag lawyers into it to get justice. I just needed the guts to pack my bags and turn off the money tap for good. Evening settled over the city. I clicked on my little reading lamp, opened my book, and took a deep breath. Life, finally, was beautifully simple. Not everyone will recognize your worth while you're still around. sometimes. All you have to do is walk away, and the rest explains itself.